Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is part 2 of a 2-part journey. The first part you heard from Ellen Guise, and now you're going to hear from Tawna Lautsenhizer. And just to give you a little background on Tawna, she's a psychotherapist in private practice, and she's been a therapist for almost 17 years. Prior to being a therapist, and I found this very interesting, she worked for the U.S. Post Office. I did a stint with the post office myself, but usually just at holidays, helped me get through college. She graduated from Duquesne University with a master's degree in counseling. But she was born in Westmoreland County here in Pennsylvania and grew up in a small town there. She's an only child, lived with her parents, but grew up with most of her family within a few miles. So your extended family was available to you. That's great. So you're very close with your parents, and you spend a lot of time with them by choice. That's that's interesting.
Right? Yeah.
You're a graduate from Norwin High School, and you attended Thiel College, which is a small Lutheran-affiliated liberal arts college not too far from here. And you were baptized in a Lutheran church in Irwin, and very active in that church growing up. I'm not going to say anything more about that because that's part of your story, and that's what we're here to listen to, your story and your personal spiritual journey. So why don't we get started? And I'm all ears.
Okay. So, well, I'm not going to read this because I guess I know what I wrote, and I may need to refer to that from time to time. But yeah, I mean, growing up in the Lutheran church, I was, as you said, I was really active. I was active in youth group, active in Sunday school. It was a really big part of me, and I guess my faith and, attended church, Sunday school every Sunday. That continued until I was a senior, I guess, basically till I graduated from high school. But my senior year, and I was like 16, 17 years old going into my senior year, I got in a relationship I fell in love with another woman in high school. And that's when things started to change for me, feeling like I wasn't so embraced by the church. Well, not just feeling that way, I wasn't so embraced by the church. Or my parents, it was a really difficult time when they found out. And it was interesting because my dad, who had never been particularly religious or spiritual, used the Bible as a reason why I shouldn't be with a woman or why I should be straight or get my life together, right? I just needed to get it together. And my mom it was devastating, and I'm sure for many reasons. That was in the early 80s, so things were a lot different then. I think they had fears for me, fears of what people would say, what they would think. It was so much involved. But at that point, I really backed away from the church a lot and felt like I, just didn't have a place there. When I went to college, I had some issues my freshman year with being outed, and that was really difficult. So at one point, I joined this Christian, I don't know if there was like an actual joining, but I started going to these Christian meetings and Bible discussions and was just trying to figure out, trying to find my way. My best friend that I had grown up with was a born-again Christian, at that time, and I was also like having all of these thoughts, like I was going to hell, and I needed to figure out my life, and so I started doing some of these Christian Bible study meetings at Teal, and that lasted for maybe a month, 2 months, and it didn't feel like a fit for me. I felt like, and I wasn't out with them at all. I was just going there and going to these Bible studies. So again, it just felt like I didn't have a place there. So I guess during that time, I just was feeling like I couldn't find my footing. I couldn't find my place in the spiritual community. And so pretty much just distanced myself from it, I guess, is the best way I could say it. It felt safer. And then I still had my faith in God and a higher power or whatever that was, but I certainly wasn't a fan of any kind of organized religion, and wasn't really quite sure how God felt about me.
Yeah. Was that reciprocal? Like you weren't sure how you felt about God?
Yeah, I think so. That's a really good question, Bob, but I think that is true. I wasn't sure. I thought, who is this person, or who is this God who's going to be judging and saying I'm not okay, or
Yeah.
people who are gay or in the queer community aren't accepted or aren't lovable. Yeah. So I would say that's true too. And then, after college, I was probably in my late 20s or early 30s. I forgot about this part when I was writing in my bio, but I went to the Metropolitan Community Church in Pittsburgh for a while. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a church that ministers mainly to LGBT community. It was started by Reverend Troy Perry back in the 70s in California. And there was a branch of it, or whatever you want to call a denomination, here in Pittsburgh. It was on Ellsworth at Friends Meeting House. And so I was going there for a while. And that was it was nice. I felt really embraced, accepted in that community. They were very a spiritual group of people. And I went there on and off probably for, like, I would say maybe a year. I wasn't 100% comfortable there, but I really liked the fact that I felt okay in that group. I felt okay. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if they're still there or not. I don't know if it's, there's still a denomination in there.
Yeah. So I guess I shouldn't jump too far ahead here, but I was just thinking with your work with Prasad that maybe that organization would have come up, or that religious community.
Well, the work I did with Prasad was only through, like, when I did my internship as a therapist, I did it in a rehab at Gateway Rehab. So I didn't work at Prasad. My affiliation with Prasad was when my wife and I, Ellen and I, took a foster son, and that was through Prasad. But that was that was my only real affiliation with them, through Prasad. And for anybody who doesn't know what Prasad is, it's an organization, nonprofit, that does amazing work with the LGBTQIA community. Mm-hmm.
And we will definitely have a link to Prasad or Prasad
Yeah, I'm
on
not sure.
on our website at yourspiritualjourneypodcast.com. I'm just making a note to be sure that that I do that.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so you've taken us up to your college experience. So what happens after you graduate, and what goes on?
Well, after I graduated, I I really wasn't affiliated much with a church community at all. I still belonged to the church I grew up in, and would, I guess, do the obligatory holidays or obligatory Christmas and Easter with my family. And so I would do that. That was fine.
By that time, had you come out to your family?
Well, my parents had found out when I was in high school, but then I was in a relationship with somebody and we never talked about it. So we did a lot of pretending for a lot of years that it didn't exist. And that seemed to work out fine for everybody until it didn't. There was a lot of pretending. And then when that person and I split up, then we had conversations. And my parents came around really and were much more accepting and open to it. But they had 14, 15 years to absorb all of that. But we know we did not talk about it and just lived our lives. And I spent quite a bit of time with them, but we just, I guess, pretended, which is unfortunate, but that seemed to work for us at that time.
Well, that sort of don't ask, don't tell
That's
era.
exactly. It was a don't ask, don't tell era, and I was just happy nobody was asking, and I certainly wasn't telling. So I didn't want to go through all the horrible stuff that I didn't want to relive any of that had happened early on, because it was some, really difficult stuff for me, and I'm sure for them too.
Well, people that I was familiar with around that time, because I had a stepbrother who was gay. I had an uncle who was gay. In fact, my uncle was a colonel in the Army.
Wow.
Or the Air Force. Yeah, he was in the Air Force. And he was married and had 3 children. And then he came out. And that was a big shock.
It was a big deal, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was. And he was forced to retire at the time. But that period of time, I recall what happened to my stepbrother, that they decided that it was a psychological problem. And so they sent him to a therapist. They gave him shock therapy. The whole routine of just the kinds of things that we really look at now and say, well, how could that be something that our society did? But it's a growth period, I guess, and it's
there was a lot of shame. I guess the big word that comes up for me over and over when I think of all of that, and I still struggle not to carry that with me 100%, but I think shame is such a big part of it. I felt really shamed by I don't want to say my extended family, but it was my mom and dad at that point, and just the lack of acceptance, and especially from my mom. My dad came around a lot sooner, but from my mom, the lack of acceptance or understanding, or it was really challenging. So I think because were really close, I looked up to her in so many ways, and so when you have this mom that I had on a pedestal, and then she's saying that this is horrible and wrong, and she thought I was perfect up till that point, which there's so many things wrong with that statement. I don't even know where to start. But so she just was really struggling and grappling with how to deal with it. And it was a different generation. Her brother had come out before that too. My uncle, same situation as yours. He had been married twice, had 3 kids, and then came out. And that was a pretty big deal in the family. But my mom was much more accepting of him. But when it came to me, that was a huge struggle for her.
And I don't know, I've met your mother. And you seem to have such a great relationship at this point in your lives.
We do. I think there's some things that are still unresolved, and I've just come to terms with the fact that those things are never going to be 100% resolved. She's 94 right now, and so we don't talk about that stuff, nor do I think she remembers her role in all of that. But I certainly do, but I've done plenty of my own work and continue to try to get past that and have forgiveness and acceptance. And sometimes I still get angry, but overall, I feel like, in that situation, we all were fumbling and trying to figure out,
Yeah.
and there was no guideline, and she wanted me to get married and do the traditional thing and have kids, and that's a sad thing for me that I never, in some ways,
Yeah.
or had kids or went that route, or that they never had grandkids. I felt some guilt about that. I'm in a much better place with all of that. But, that's age, and doing my own work
Yeah.
around that has been helpful for sure.
So I guess I imagined, just coming from my own head and my own thoughts about this, that your decision to go the route of becoming a therapist was partially influenced by your grappling with this and trying to make sense of it all, and that thinking that, well, maybe these courses and these books on psychotherapy and that will give me some clues as to how to deal with my own shame, as you put it, and other situations.
I think you give me way too much credit there, Bob.
Okay.
I didn't have that kind of insight, to be honest with you. And this is kind of funny. My friends tell me it's kind of sad in a way. When I was a kid, I used to watch the Bob Newhart show.
Oh,
Remember,
yeah,
he was a
sure.
psychologist.
Uh-huh.
And I always wanted to do what he did. I thought,
Oh.
that's what I want to do. Like, I wasn't looking at exciting, like, John Wayne movies and thinking, oh, that would be so fun, or I want to do some, wonderful adventure. I wanted to be Bob Newhart. So, and then I put that aside for so many years. And then I guess there is certainly a link, because when I went into therapy myself, and that was probably in like 1999, 2000, something like that. It was so helpful for me. And that's when I started thinking again, like, this is really what I want to do. And so it was so helpful for me, and it helped me explore myself, do my own work, try to have some self-acceptance. Again, those are all things I still grapple with, but I've come a long way, I think, since that time. So that I graduated with my master's at the end of '05 and started doing some, therapy on the side, like mobile therapy, before I jumped into it full time, and before I left my post office job. Like, I had a good job there. I worked in marketing. I mean, I was, well paid for what I did, but it wasn't important to me. It didn't
Yeah.
matter. So I
Sure.
wanted to do something that was important to me. And then, kind of going back to the spiritual journey part of it, in '09, that's when I was still a member of the Lutheran Church in Irwin, and the minister at that time. And that was when a lot of the denominations were, I think, struggling with, are we going to, do gay marriage? Are we going to accept gay marriage? There was a lot around that. And so the Lutheran Church was in the middle of all of that. And he wrote this newsletter out to the whole congregation, basically, stating that it was wrong in God's eyes, and just he was very opposed to gay marriage, and we should all work and donate money to fight that. And it was a whole thing that he had written at that time. And so that's where I thought, this is where I need to part ways, for sure. I wrote him a letter, and in the church, a letter, and explaining, this is why I think that people that in the gay community don't feel embraced by the church, because of this lack of care and love and support and acceptance. Yeah, so I wrote him a letter. He wrote me back. We had, a few phone calls, and it just, I just got the message loud and clear that this is not a place I want to be. where I don't feel welcomed or cared for. If you're going to look at, I mean, certainly I'm aware that we're all sinners, right? I know that, but I don't want to look at it like, well, because I'm gay or because I'm in a relationship with another woman, that makes me something that I'm always needing to repent for. You know, I can't live my life like that. So I left there, didn't, that was in '09. And I felt like this huge relief. It just felt so good to be able to write that letter and speak up for myself and just say, like, I'm done, and take a stand. It felt really good. And then in 2011, that's when I did a Google search for gay-friendly churches. I was with my current partner. Well, we're married now, but back then, you know, she was interested too, Ellen. And so I did a Google search, and a bunch of Presbyterian churches came up as being gay-friendly, and Waverly happened to be one that was close by, Waverly Presbyterian. So we checked it out. We came there on Palm Sunday in 2011, and it was like I'd committed to myself that I wasn't going to, you know, be anything other than who I was. Like said, you know, told Becky, who was a minister at the time, when she came to us, like, yep, I was looking for a gay-friendly church. We're a couple. Like, we just presented ourselves as that right from the first day. And the amount of love and support, and you're certainly one of the people that stand out for me, Bob, is, you know, coming up and talking to us. And you even asked me to be on the membership committee. I was like, wow. You know, not the first day, probably the second day. But anyway, felt so loved and supported there. And I think I cried every time we went there for about the first year, because it just was unbelievable to me that I could feel the love and support in a faith community, and, you know, nobody else seemed to be freaking out that I was sitting there with my partner, or that we might hold hands in church or whatever. It was just normal. And so I would cry a lot. I think one of the other members asked Ellen, is everything okay with Tawna? Because I was crying a lot. And it was hard to believe. So it was just this experience that I had, and I can't explain it. So when I was able to fully embrace and who I was, and say, this is who I am, and go to a place and felt loved and accepted for that, it just felt like so much change for me internally at that point. Like, I don't know. And I could have never in a million, I would have never imagined I would have been as involved in a church that I have been at Waverly, like to be on session and, you know, be an elder there, and just any number of things, going to Rwanda for the mission trip and having close friends. And, you know, from the church, I could never have imagined that to be true, but I've just felt so, we have felt so loved and embraced there. And it's kind of, when we got married, one of the women in the church, she always does this really cool cross stitch with a picture of the couple, and then does like a nice cross stitch frame for everyone that gets married. I didn't know that. And then when we got married, she did one for us, for Ellen and I, and gave it to us. And, you know, I thought, oh my gosh, like, does she know that, like, we're married and we're a couple? I still was questioning it at that point, you know. And Ellen said, I'm pretty sure, Tawna, that she knows, because this is like our wedding invitation, you know. So it's just, there was, with no exception, everyone has been wonderful and embraced us. And that makes all the difference. That's for me.
Well, you're making me tear up.
Yeah, well, I have tissues here because I was afraid I was going to start crying. So you're welcome to one.
Yeah. Oh, it's just you never know what impact you're going to have on somebody.
You don't know. None of us
And
know the impact we have, and so you don't know the impact you've had on me. I mean, you were at our wedding. Yeah, yeah. Did you dance at our wedding, Bob? I don't know if you danced there, but you were there. It was a beautiful celebration. And yeah, so I guess that's my spiritual journey. And then in 2019, again, our interim pastor, Jane Duffield, we had a table at Pride. Well, not we. There was a table at Pride that Waverly then was part of. I think East Liberty Presbyterian Church, and that's where I got these buttons. I wanted you to wear the button that I have on so I could remember right as we're talking that God loves us.
well, I wore this button at that event because Amy and I helped with
right,
the
last
booth
year
there.
down at Swissville when we were there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So in 2019, we helped at Pride, and that was like I was like, here I am at this. I'm always just like so amazed when there's faith communities that are saying, you know, it's okay, and we're here, and here we are at Pride. So I was just amazed. I'm at this booth, and people are coming by, and we're talking about Waverly and talking about, you know, and there's, it's, you know, for the queer community. And it was amazing. And so we were a part of that. And then the pandemic happened for a couple years. We didn't do that. So then after that, there was a group that had started. It was an inclusive group of like Presbyterian churches and people that were involved, like wanting to embrace the gay community. And so I became somewhat involved, and now I'm more involved. I'm the Waverly rep for that, and it's called L.A.M.P, LGBTQ Affirming Ministries of Pittsburgh. And yeah, it's just we're getting the word out there, and I think it's going to be expanding. We're getting more of a foundation of, you know, who we are as an organization, but how we can reach out to people who don't feel loved and cared for. You know, people that are in the gay community and the queer community who don't feel loved and cared for, and there's plenty of them. I sometimes am astounded that it's still in 2023 that there's so many people that are fearful to come out because it seems like it's such a different world, but yet every world is not different. Every family is not different. Every faith is not different. You know, there's still plenty of people out there saying it's not okay, and, you know, you should go to hell and all of those things. So, or not embraced by their family. So, yeah, I think we'll see where this goes. But even for people who are fearful of going into brick and mortar facilities or churches, right, there will be a place for them, or a group they can connect with to say, you're okay, you know, and God loves you, and you're fine and okay and better than okay just the way you are. Yeah.
Well, you're a professional therapist. There is a therapy out there called conversion therapy.
Yeah.
And I understand it's fallen into disfavor in the professional community, but it's still there.
Mm-hmm. It is. Some states, I think it's illegal, if I'm not mistaken. At this point, I should probably know more about that. But yeah, it still happens. It's real. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in many states, I think it's still happening. And people who are thinking that you can, I don't know, beat it out of somebody or show them enough, you know, give them enough information to have them change. And that's just, it's not realistic. I mean, it's sad. It's sad. I've read quite a bit about that and people who have gone through that. Mm-hmm. Talk about shaming. I mean, my experience was nothing compared to that. Really, it was that's some deep-seated shame.
Well, if we look at what's really biblical and what Jesus' message was, it was a message of love. It's a message that we are all created in the image of God. Every one of us, not just certain people.
Right.
That it's Christianity is supposed to be all inclusive. Uh, but you still wonder sometimes, in terms of what is it that, or who is it that represents Christianity? Because there are just so many different forms and versions of it.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, when I went to a big pride down in D.C., and that was in the early 2000s. I mean, there's that faction. I forget the name of the church, Westboro Baptist.
Oh, yeah. I remember that being in the headlines.
Yeah,
Sure.
it was a big deal, and they have their signs everywhere that, God hates fags and all this awful stuff that they put out there. So, yeah, they're still around. I think they're a much smaller group, but there's, still plenty of churches and denominations who aren't that extreme, but will also are, anti-gay marriage, obviously, right? Yeah, and think it's wrong biblically and use a lot of biblical examples from Leviticus and,
Yeah.
I guess we could look in the Bible to discriminate against any group of people if we choose to look for that.
Certainly. And
Yeah.
it's been used, to bolster slavery.
Right.
And I don't know. I guess my own faith is, based on Jesus' message of love and no exceptions. And the fact that we're all made in the image of God, and that's end of story. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful message.
Yeah.
Very loving.
So that I tried to put myself in the place of our listeners and just consider what questions they might have. Actually, this may sound silly, but you said that you did mobile therapy, and I thought, okay, was she going around on a scooter and visiting
that
people
would have
in
been
their
so
homes?
much more fun than if I went on a scooter.
So what is mobile therapy?
Well, that's what was my first. When I still worked at the Postal Service and I was doing therapy on the side, you go to people's homes. So I worked with this organization, and so it's services called Wraparound, and you go. And so I had a couple different kids that I would visit. One little boy was in Wilkinsburg, and one young lady was in like Homestead area. And I would go to them and their family and work with them there, and kind of work with the bigger family system, like work with the kid and the family. So it certainly had its challenges, and we weren't supposed to mobile the kids around. We were not supposed to be taking the kids, but most of us did. I certainly did, like, drive them places, because sometimes it was super challenging to be in the home. There was not a quiet place in the house to talk or whatever. So, but yeah, that's what mobile therapy was. I did it for a couple years, and then that was enough. It was challenging. Yeah, it's a challenging job.
Yeah. Okay. This is something that I asked Ellen in that interview, and I was curious to get your take on the decision to do that mission trip to Rwanda. Like, what was it that spurred you to say, yeah, I want to do that?
Well, you were a part of that because I trust you a lot, and I knew that you were really involved with them and Hope Made Real and Iraconda and all of that. It felt exciting to be going and doing that trip and having a new adventure and trying to help in some way. So it felt really exciting. And I have to say, like, always at the background for me is like, oh, but how is the fact that, you know, we're in a gay relationship, in a lesbian relationship, how is that going to be when we're there, right? So, like, when the plane stopped in Uganda and it's illegal, like, are they going to look at our, somehow, are they going to find out? Are we going to be in trouble? Are we going to,
Yeah.
it's always like, what's going to, I was looking up, like, what, how, if you're gay in Rwanda and somebody finds out, are we going to get arrested? Because, those are all, like, concerns. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
like we were carrying the flag over there, but I was a little nervous in terms of that, but then
But you didn't
talking
let
to
that
you,
stop you.
I didn't know, it didn't stop us, but I took my wedding ring off when I was there, and just we just went along like we didn't act like a couple when we were there. It was fine, and it was a great, wonderful experience. I have no regrets about going. But yeah, there was that little thing in the back of my head that Ellen said, "Oh my God, I never even thought of that." But yeah, I think about all that stuff.
Yeah. So some of our audience may be thinking about, okay, mission trips overseas. Is that something I want to do? Is it going to give me what I think it might give me? Is it going to allow me to give what I want to give? So maybe you could say a couple words about, the value of a mission trip.
Right. I think so many mission trips are so different. Like, this wasn't the kind of, I don't know to say what kind of mission trip it was, but we were definitely involved. I felt like we definitely all had a role there, and that was really nice. Like, I remember being in the classroom and helping in some ways with that, and with Amy, and being around the kids. And it just it's hard to even put into words what it felt like. It was very loving. It felt important. And I think more so even than the work that we did, by whether it was helping, like Bill was painting and doing all sorts of work, or even more so than the work, I think it was just being there and being part of their, like, Uraconda family at that time, being around the kids and just getting lots of hugs from them, and for Mama, and just the whole experience. I don't know. It's hard to put into words, but it was a wonderful experience.
So when we go back in 2024, is that on your calendar?
Not yet, but we'll have some conversations about it. Yeah, it's a possibility. I'll have to see. My mom has some, health struggles and stuff, so I have to see if I'm able to travel at that point, to that far.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I should keep your mother in mind.
Yeah.
I should.
But I'm not ruling it out.
Okay. All right. Well, at this point in the podcast, there are a couple things I like to do.
Okay.
One is to give homework assignment to my audience.
Oh, okay, good. It's not to me then,
No,
right?
it's not you. Because there are certain things in our conversation that may resonate with them. So I want them to think about that and think about what might apply to their lives, rather than just walk away from the podcast, forget everything we said, and move on with their lives. The second thing is that I asked the guest, what words might you want to leave with the audience? What is it that, I could call them words of wisdom, but what would you like to leave them with that they might have as a takeaway from our conversation?
It's a really good question. I think just what our button says, God loves us. That's the main thing, is just know that, and to kind of just requote you, is God loves us and who we are, and there's a place for you out there. And certainly if you're in the queer community and you're feeling unloved or not accepted, there's a place for you. And if you just look for that, or come to Waverly, or any other number of churches that are accepting, or reach out. And yeah, there's a place for you. There's a place for all of us, and that's really important. We all have a place at the table.
That's a great message. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here.
It was fun. I enjoyed it. It was good. I was a little nervous.
Well, Ellen said that you might cry, you might bring me to tears. Well, you did bring me to tears. And so that wraps up another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. Everybody have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.